The last gunshot of the evening echoed across the dusty plains of Promise Creek as Olivia Osborne watched her father's body crumple to the floor of their modest farmhouse. It wasn't the bullet that killed him. It was his heart giving out after months of struggling against the consumption that had ravaged his lungs and the debts that had ravaged their lives. The year was 1875, and at 18 years old, Olivia found herself alone with nothing but a stack of unpaid loans and the dusty winds of Wyoming territory whistling through the cracks of their failing homestead. "Your pa owed me $800, girl," Clive Harrison drawled, his gold tooth glinting in the lantern light as he pocketed his pistol. He hadn't fired the shot that frightened her father to death that had been his associate's doing, a warning shot through the ceiling, but he might as well have pulled the trigger himself. "And I aim to collect, one way or another." Olivia stood frozen beside her father's body, her honey-brown hair falling from its pins, her calloused hands trembling. "We don't have anything left, Mr. Harrison. The drought took our crops. The fever took our livestock. Please just give me time. Harrison laughed, the sound like rocks grinding together. He was the wealthiest man in the territory, owner of the bank, the saloon, and most of the good grazing land. "Time is a luxury you can't afford, but you're a pretty little thing. I know a gentleman in Denver who runs a special kind of establishment. He'd pay handsomely for a fresh face like yours." The meaning of his words sank into Olivia's stomach like a stone. Her mother had raised her to be proper despite their humble circumstances, teaching her to read and write, to speak well, to dream of something better than this hardscrabble existence. Now her mother was 3 years in the grave, and Olivia was being appraised like livestock. "You're selling me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind outside. "Consider it an opportunity to settle your father's debts," Harrison said, gesturing to his men. "Pack only what you can carry. We leave at first light." That night, Olivia curled beside her father's body, too numb to cry, too exhausted to run. Where would she go? Who would help her? The nearest neighbor was miles away, and most folks in town owed Harrison money themselves. She whispered prayers into the darkness until exhaustion claimed her. Dawn broke harsh and unforgiving across the plains. Harrison's men wrapped her father in a sheet and buried him behind the house without ceremony. Olivia stood watching, clutching a small bundle containing her mother's Bible, a faded photograph, and a change of clothes. Her heart felt as dry and cracked as the parched earth beneath her feet. "Time to go, girl," Harrison barked. Already mounted on his bay stallion, they rode into Promise Creek, a town that had never lived up to its name. One dusty street lined with false-fronted buildings, a saloon, a general store, and Harrison's bank. People averted their eyes as they passed. Everyone knew what happened to debtors who couldn't pay. Harrison led them to the auction block outside the livery stable, where livestock and occasionally property were sold to the highest bidder. Today, it seemed, the merchandise would be human. "Gentlemen," Harrison called to the small crowd that had gathered, some out of curiosity, others summoned specifically for this purpose. "I have here a fine young woman to settle an outstanding debt, strong, educated, unspoiled. Bidding starts at $800. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face as several men began to call out numbers. Most were strangers traders passing through, a mine owner from the next county over, the owner of a gambling hall in Cheyenne. Harrison had planned this well. 900, 950, 1,000. The voices blurred together as Olivia stared at her boots, shame and fear coursing through her veins. This couldn't be happening. Not in America, not in 1875. But frontier justice had its own rules, and women without protection had few rights that men were bound to respect. $1,600. The deep voice cut through the commotion, silencing the crowd. Olivia's head snapped up. A tall figure sat astride a magnificent black stallion at the edge of the gathering. The morning sun was at his back, casting his face in shadow, but she could make out broad shoulders, a straight back, and the unmistakable silhouette of a cowboy hat. Harrison's eyebrows shot up. 1,600, that's double the debt. The stranger nudged his horse forward, emerging from the glare of the sun. He was younger than Olivia had expected, perhaps 25, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair curled at the nape of his neck beneath his hat, and a week's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. "Samuel Jackson," he introduced himself, his voice carrying the slight drawl of Texas. "I understand this young lady's father owed you 800. I'm offering double to clear the debt and secure her freedom." Harrison's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why would you pay double for what these other fellows are willing to take off my hands for less?" Samuel Jackson dismounted in one fluid motion, boots hitting the dirt with a solid thud. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to dangerous situations. "Because I'm not buying her," he said, voice low enough that only Harrison and Olivia could hear. "I'm settling her father's debt and ensuring she remains her own person. The extra is for your silence on the matter." Harrison's greedy eyes gleamed. "Cash!" Samuel reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of gold coins. "Count it if you like." While Harrison verified the payment, Olivia studied her mysterious benefactor. He didn't look like a wealthy man. His clothes were practical and well-worn denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, a leather vest, and a duster that had seen many miles. Yet there was something in his bearing that spoke of dignity, of purpose. "Why?" she whispered when he approached her. "You don't know me." His storm-gray eyes met hers directly. "No man has the right to sell another human being, not in this country, not anymore." Harrison finished counting and tucked the money into his coat with a satisfied smile. "She's all yours, Jackson, do what you will." "She's not mine," Samuel replied firmly. "She's free to go wherever she chooses." He turned to Olivia. "Miss, I have a proposition for you, but you're under no obligation to accept it." Olivia swallowed hard, wary of another trap. "What kind of proposition?" "I own a cattle ranch about 20 miles north of here. My sister runs the household, but she's expecting a child and could use help. I'm offering you employment, fair wages, your own quarters, and my word as a gentleman that you'll be treated with respect." Hope fluttered in Olivia's chest, fragile as a butterfly's wing. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" A shadow passed over Samuel's face. "Let's just say I understand what it means to be at the mercy of men like Harrison." He gestured to his horse. "The offer stands, but the choice is yours. I can also escort you to the stagecoach station if you'd prefer to leave this place behind." Olivia glanced around at the town that had turned its back on her family in their time of need, at Harrison's smug face, at the men who had been willing to buy her like chattel. What choice did she really have? At least with Samuel Jackson, she sensed honor, a rare commodity in these parts. "I accept your offer of employment, Mr. Jackson," she said with as much dignity as she could muster. Samuel nodded, something like approval flickering in his eyes. He helped her mount his horse, then swung up behind her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "One more thing," he said to Harrison before they departed. "I want you to send word to Miss Osborne's relatives. Surely she has some family somewhere." Harrison scoffed. "Why should I bother?" Samuel's expression hardened. "Because it's part of our arrangement. Double the debt, remember? Half for her freedom, half for your cooperation." Harrison muttered something under his breath but nodded grudgingly. "Last I heard, she has an aunt in Missouri. I'll send a telegram." "See that you do," Samuel replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. As they rode out of Promise Creek, Olivia felt a strange mixture of grief, relief, and trepidation. Her father was dead. Her home was lost. She was riding off with a stranger whose motives she couldn't fully trust. Yet somehow, for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. "Mr. Jackson," she said as the town disappeared behind them, "I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." "There's nothing to repay," he replied, his voice carried on the wind. "And please call me Samuel." They rode north across rolling grasslands dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. The spring air carried the scent of earth awakening after winter's slumber. Olivia had never ventured this far from Promise Creek before, and despite her circumstances, she couldn't help but marvel at the vastness of the Wyoming territory stretching before them. "How did you know what was happening?" she asked after they had ridden in silence for some time. "How did you know about me?" Samuel was quiet for so long that Olivia thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, Word travels fast out here. I was in town picking up supplies when I heard Harrison's men talking about collecting a debt in a most dishonorable way. You risked a great deal of money for a stranger, Olivia observed. She felt rather than saw his shrug. Money is just money, some things matter more. By midday, they stopped beside a clear stream to rest the horse and eat the simple provisions Samuel had packed: jerky, corn bread, and dried apples. Olivia ate ravenously, suddenly aware of how little she'd consumed in the past few days as her father's condition worsened. "My ranch is called Horizon," Samuel told her as they rested in the shade of a cottonwood tree. "It's not the biggest spread in the territory, but the land is good. I run about 500 head of cattle with the help of 4 cowhands. My sister Charlotte came out from Boston 2 years ago after her husband died. She's expecting in about 3 months. I'm handy around a house," Olivia offered. "I can cook, clean, mend. My mother taught me," Samuel nodded. "Charlotte will appreciate the help. She's not used to frontier life, though she tries her best." He hesitated. "May I ask about your family?" Harrison mentioned an aunt in Missouri. Olivia's throat tightened. "My mother's sister, Aunt Rebecca. We haven't seen her since Mama died 3 years ago. She didn't approve of my father or our life out here." She plucked at a blade of grass. "We had a good farm once before the drought. My father wasn't always in debt. He was a good man who had bad luck. Many good men have been broken by this land," Samuel said quietly. "It takes as much as it gives." As they continued their journey, Olivia learned that Samuel had come west after the war between the states, where he'd fought for the Union despite his Texas upbringing. He'd worked as a cowhand until he saved enough to buy his own land 5 years ago. He spoke little of his past before the war, and Olivia sensed there were stories he preferred to keep buried. Late in the afternoon, they crested a hill and Samuel reined in his horse. There it is, Horizon Ranch. Below them, a valley opened up, lush with spring grass. A creek meandered through it, lined with cottonwoods and willows. Near the creek stood a sturdy 2-story house built of logs and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Nearby were a large barn, corrals, a bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Cattle grazed on the distant hillsides, and smoke curled from the house's chimney. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, the word feeling strange after so much ugliness. "It's home," Samuel replied simply. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the porch, one hand resting on her swollen belly. Charlotte Jackson Ellis was younger than Olivia had expected, perhaps 23, with the same storm gray eyes as her brother but honey blonde hair pulled into a practical bun. Her face lit up at the sight of Samuel, then registered curiosity at the sight of Olivia. "Samuel. You're back early," Charlotte's voice trailed off as they drew closer. "And you've brought company." Samuel dismounted and helped Olivia down before embracing his sister. "Charlotte, this is Miss Olivia Osborne. She'll be helping you with the household until the baby comes. Maybe longer if you both agree." Charlotte's gaze was keen but not unkind as she assessed Olivia. "Well, Miss Osborne, you look like you've had a long journey. Come inside and refresh yourself while my brother explains exactly how this arrangement came about." The pointed look she gave Samuel suggested she knew her brother well enough to suspect there was more to the story. The interior of the house was surprisingly refined for a frontier home. The main floor consisted of a spacious living room with comfortable furniture, a dining room with a polished oak table that could seat 10, and a large kitchen with a modern iron stove. Photographs and small paintings adorned the walls, and bookshelves lined one wall of the living room. "You have books," Olivia couldn't help remarking, drawn to the shelves. Charlotte smiled. "Samuel reads voraciously. Our father was a schoolteacher before," she stopped herself. "Well, education was valued in our family." While Charlotte showed Olivia to a small but comfortable bedroom off the kitchen, Samuel tended to his horse. By the time the women returned downstairs, he was washing up at the kitchen pump. "Now," Charlotte said, sitting at the kitchen table, "I believe I'm owed an explanation about our new household member." Samuel exchanged a glance with Olivia, who nodded slightly, giving him permission to tell her story. As he recounted the events in Promise Creek, Charlotte's expression shifted from shock to outrage to compassion. "That despicable Harrison," she fumed when Samuel finished. To sell a human being in 1875 as if the war meant nothing. It's not uncommon out here, Samuel said grimly. The law is thin, and men like Harrison make their own rules. Charlotte reached across the table and squeezed Olivia's hand. You're safe now, my dear, and not just as an employee as our guest until you decide what you wish to do with your life. She shot a stern look at her brother. I assume you've sent for her family. Harrison is supposed to contact her aunt in Missouri, Samuel confirmed, though whether he'll follow through remains to be seen. I wouldn't count on it, Olivia said softly, and even if he does, I'm not sure Aunt Rebecca would welcome me. She thought my father was beneath my mother's station, and she washed her hands of us years ago. Charlotte's face softened. Then you'll stay with us until you find your footing. Now you must be exhausted. Why don't you rest before supper? The cowhands won't be in from the range until dark, so we have time. In her small room, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Hours ago, she had been facing a life of exploitation and degradation. Now she was in a comfortable home with people who, despite being strangers, had shown her more kindness than she'd experienced in years. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both, muffling the sounds in her pillow until exhaustion claimed her. She awoke to Charlotte's gentle knock. Supper's nearly ready, Olivia. I've laid out some fresh clothes that might fit you. They're my old things from before. She patted her belly with a smile. Olivia washed her face in the basin provided and changed into the offered dress, a simple blue calico that was slightly too large but clean and whole. She brushed her hair and pinned it up as best she could, wanting to make a good impression on the household she'd be joining. The kitchen was filled with delicious aromas and the sounds of men's voices when she emerged. 4 cowhands of varying ages stood around, washing up for supper. They fell silent when Olivia appeared, curiosity evident in their expressions. Samuel, who had changed into a clean shirt, made the introductions. Miss Osborne, these are the men who keep Horizon running. Hank, our foreman, Pete and Caleb, who have been with me since I started this place, and Joaquin, our newest addition. The men nodded respectfully, though questions lingered in their eyes. It wasn't every day that their boss brought home a young woman. Miss Osborne will be helping Charlotte with the household, Samuel explained simply, offering no further details about her circumstances. The men seemed to accept this, and conversation resumed as they sat down to a hearty meal of beef stew, biscuits, and preserved peaches. Olivia said little during supper, observing the easy camaraderie between Samuel and his men. They discussed cattle, weather, neighboring ranches, and plans for the upcoming spring roundup. It was clear they respected Samuel and enjoyed working for him. Charlotte, too, was treated with genuine affection, the men solicitously ensuring she had everything she needed before serving themselves. After the meal, the cowhands retired to the bunkhouse while Charlotte, Samuel, and Olivia remained at the table, sipping coffee. I should explain your duties, Charlotte said. I manage the household accounts and meal planning, but the physical work has become increasingly difficult. She gestured to her expanding middle. I'll need help with cooking, cleaning, laundry, and tending the kitchen garden. The men handle the livestock, including the chickens and milk cow, though they'd prefer not to admit to such women's work. Her eyes twinkled with amusement. I can do all of that, Olivia assured her. At home, I did everything after my mother passed. We'll work together until you learn the rhythms of this household, Charlotte said. As for your compensation, we'll provide room and board plus $20 a month. Does that seem fair? Olivia nearly choked on her coffee. $20 a month was generous for a housekeeper's position, especially with room and board included. More than fair, she managed. Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, this little one is doing somersaults and I need to lie down. Charlotte rose with some difficulty. Samuel immediately stood to help her, but she waved him off with a smile. I'm pregnant, not porcelain, brother dear. She patted Olivia's shoulder as she passed. We'll begin your orientation tomorrow. Sleep well. Left alone with Samuel, Olivia felt a sudden awkwardness descend. He was, after all, a man she barely knew, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Your sister is very kind, she offered. Samuel nodded, a fond expression softening his features. Charlotte has always had a generous heart, too generous sometimes. Her late husband was. He paused, seeming to search for diplomatic words. Not worthy of her. When he died of pneumonia 2 years ago, I insisted she come live with me. You're very protective of her. We're all each other has left of our family, he replied. Our parents died when we were young. After that, well, life wasn't always kind. Something in his tone made Olivia wonder what hardships they had endured, but she didn't feel it was her place to pry. Instead, she asked about the ranch, a safer topic. Samuel's face brightened as he spoke of Horizon, the struggles of establishing it, the pride he took in building something from nothing, his hopes for its future. Olivia found herself drawn to his passion, the quiet confidence with which he spoke of his dreams. I've talked enough about myself, he said eventually. What about you, Miss Osborne? What were your dreams before my life fell apart? Olivia finished with a sad smile. Simple ones, I suppose. I wanted to marry someone kind, have children, maybe open a small school someday. I love teaching children to read. She traced the grain of the wooden table with her finger. My mother taught me to value education. She had been a school teacher before she married my father. Those are worthy dreams, Samuel said quietly, and not impossible even now. Olivia met his gaze. Perhaps, but first I need to find my footing in this new life you've given me. I didn't give you anything you didn't already possess, Samuel corrected gently. Your life was always your own. I merely prevented someone from stealing it. The simple truth of his words struck Olivia deeply. She had been raised to believe in her own worth, but years of hardship had eroded that belief. In Samuel's eyes, she saw it reflected back at her humanity, her dignity. Thank you, she whispered. Not just for today, but for reminding me of that. An unexpected warmth colored his cheeks. He stood abruptly. I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be a full day. At the doorway, he paused. Good night, Miss Osborne. Good night, Mr. Jackson, she replied, watching as he disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, wondering at the strange fluttering in her chest. Days at Horizon Ranch quickly settled into a rhythm. Olivia rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast for the household. Mornings were spent cleaning, baking, and tending to the ever-expanding kitchen garden. Afternoons were devoted to laundry, mending, and learning the household systems Charlotte had developed over the years. Charlotte proved to be an excellent teacher, patient but thorough. More than that, she became a friend, filling the lonely void Olivia had carried since her mother's death. They shared stories as they worked, Charlotte telling tales of Boston society and her disastrous marriage to a charming gambler who had squandered her modest inheritance before his untimely death. I was fortunate to have Samuel, Charlotte confided one afternoon as they hung laundry in the spring sunshine. When Thomas died, I had nowhere to go. Samuel sent money for my passage west without hesitation, though he could ill afford it at the time. He seems to make a habit of rescuing women in distress, Olivia observed, thinking of her own circumstances. Charlotte gave her a shrewd look. My brother has always had a strong sense of justice, but I've never seen him risk so much for a stranger before. She smoothed a sheet against the line. He must have seen something special in you, Olivia. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. I think he simply couldn't abide what Harrison was doing. Perhaps, Charlotte said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Samuel has his own demons, you know. Things happened after our parents died. Experiences that shaped him. He doesn't speak of them, but they're there in his nightmares, in the way he sometimes stares at nothing. Olivia had noticed Samuel's occasional distant gaze, the way he sometimes startled at unexpected sounds. She'd attributed it to his military service, but Charlotte's words suggested older wounds. What happened to your parents? She dared to ask. Charlotte was quiet for a moment, pinning a shirt to the line with deliberate care. They were killed during a robbery when I was 8 and Samuel was 10. We were sent to live with our uncle, our father's brother. Her hands stilled. He was not a kind man. The shadow that crossed Charlotte's face told Olivia not to press further. Instead, she said softly, I'm sorry. It seems we both know what it is to lose family too soon. Charlotte's expression softened. Yes, though I was blessed to have Samuel, he protected me as best he could, even as a child. When he was 16, he took me and ran. We survived on his wits and work until the war came. She rested a hand on her belly. This child will know only love and safety. I've promised myself that. With you and Samuel as family, I'm certain of it, Olivia assured her. The weeks passed and spring ripened into early summer. The roundup came and went, bringing long days of work for the men and equally long days for the women, who kept the household running and prepared massive meals for hungry cowhands. Olivia threw herself into the work, grateful for the purpose it gave her days and the bone-deep exhaustion that helped her sleep at night. Samuel was often absent from the house, riding out at dawn and returning after dark. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but somewhat reserved. Olivia tried to convince herself that his distance was natural. She was, after all, an employee, not a friend or family member. Yet she couldn't help feeling a twinge of disappointment each time he excused himself from her company. One evening in late June, Olivia was sitting on the porch, shelling peas and enjoying the sunset when Samuel rode in. He looked weary, his clothes dusty from the trail, but he smiled when he saw her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and made something flutter in her chest. "Miss Osborne," he greeted her, dismounting and removing his hat. "A fine evening, isn't it?" "Beautiful," she agreed, "though it looks like rain coming from the west." He glanced at the darkening horizon and nodded. "Good eye, we could use the moisture." He hesitated, then asked, "May I join you?" Olivia gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Of course, though I warn you, I'll put you to work." She held out the bowl of unpotted peas. To her surprise, Samuel sat and began shelling peas with practiced ease. When she raised an eyebrow, he chuckled. "I wasn't always a rancher, Miss Osborne. I've done my share of kitchen work." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the soft popping of pea pods and the distant lowing of cattle. Eventually, Samuel spoke. "I received a telegram in town today," he said, his tone carefully neutral, "from Harrison." Olivia's hands stilled. "Oh, he claims he sent word to your aunt in Missouri but received no reply." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Whether that's true or whether he ever sent the telegram at all, I can't say." Olivia resumed her shelling, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her stomach. "It doesn't matter. Aunt Rebecca made her feelings clear years ago. She wouldn't want the burden of a penniless niece." "You're not a burden," Samuel said with unexpected fierceness. "You're a remarkable young woman who has faced adversity with dignity and courage." Olivia looked up, startled by his vehemence and the compliment embedded within it. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something electric passed between them, something that made her breath catch and her heart quicken. Samuel broke the gaze first, clearing his throat. "What I mean to say is, you're welcome here for as long as you wish to stay. Charlotte values your help, especially with the baby coming, and the men appreciate your cooking far more than mine." "Thank you," Olivia said softly. "Horizon has become more of a home to me in these few weeks than any place has been since my mother died." A comfortable silence fell between them again, broken only when fat raindrops began to patter on the porch roof. They gathered the peas and moved inside just as the skies opened up, rain sheeting down in a silver curtain. "Perfect timing," Samuel observed as they entered the warm kitchen, "though the men out checking the north pasture won't be so fortunate." "There's stew keeping warm on the stove," Olivia told him. "Charlotte retired early. The baby was restless today, but she left plenty for you and the others when they return." Samuel smiled his thanks, and Olivia was struck by how the simple domesticity of the moment felt so right, so natural. As if they'd been sharing evenings like this for years rather than weeks. She served him a bowl of stew and fresh bread, then busied herself putting away the peas while he ate. She was aware of his presence in a way that both unsettled and excited her, the sound of his spoon against the bowl, the appreciative hum he made at the first taste, the way he sat with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "This is delicious," he said between bites. "You have a gift, Miss Osborne." "Olivia," she said impulsively. "Please, after all this time, I think you might call me Olivia." He looked up, surprise and something warmer flickering in his eyes. "Olivia," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name on his tongue. "Then you must call me Samuel, at least when we're not in company." "Samuel," she echoed, liking the way it sounded. They shared a smile, and that electric something crackled between them again, making the kitchen feel suddenly smaller, more intimate. The moment was broken by the sound of the bunkhouse door slamming and boots on the porch as the remaining cowhands returned, soaked and hungry. Olivia busied herself serving them, grateful for the distraction from the confusing feelings Samuel's presence aroused in her. Later that night, lying in her bed listening to the rain drumming on the roof, Olivia acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Samuel Jackson. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. He had saved her, given her a home, treated her with respect, but that didn't mean he saw her as anything more than an employee or his sister's companion. Even if he did feel something for her, what future could they have? She had nothing to offer but herself, no family connections, no dowry, not even her father's good name, tarnished as it was by debt. Samuel deserved someone who could bring something to the match besides gratitude and admiration. Olivia turned her face into the pillow, determined to master these inconvenient feelings. She would be sensible. She would focus on her work, on helping Charlotte with the baby, on building a life for herself that didn't depend on Samuel Jackson's presence or approval. Yet even as she made these resolutions, her traitorous heart whispered his name in the darkness, matching rhythm with the rain. July brought scorching heat and the constant threat of wildfire. The men worked tirelessly to ensure the cattle had access to water, moving them between grazing areas and keeping watch for predators drawn to the watering holes. In the house, Olivia and Charlotte preserved the garden's bounty, putting up jars of vegetables and fruits for the winter months ahead. Charlotte's pregnancy had advanced to the point where she tired easily, often retreating to her room in the afternoons to rest. This left Olivia in charge of the household for significant portions of the day, a responsibility she took seriously. She found satisfaction in keeping the large home running smoothly, in preparing meals that were met with appreciation, in creating a peaceful haven from the harsh realities of frontier life. One brutally hot afternoon, Olivia was alone in the house, Charlotte having gone to lie down after lunch. She was making preparations for supper when a rider approached at a gallop. Looking out the window, she saw it was Joaquin, the youngest of the ranch hands, his face tight with urgency. She met him on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's happened? Is the boss here?" Joaquin asked, dismounting in a rush. "No, he rode out at dawn to check the eastern boundary," Olivia replied. "What's wrong?" "Fire," Joaquin said grimly. "Lightning struck in the South Valley last night, winds picking up, spreading the flames. Hank sent me to get the boss and more hands if possible." Olivia's heart raced. She'd heard enough stories about prairie fires to know their devastating potential. Samuel won't be back for hours. Charlotte is resting. The doctor said she shouldn't be upset in her condition. Joaquin swore under his breath, then immediately apologized. "Sorry, Miss Osborne, but we need help and fast." Olivia made a swift decision. "Take the wagon. There are empty barrels in the barn. Fill them with water. I'll pack food and medical supplies. Hurry." While Joaquin prepared the wagon, Olivia gathered bandages, salve for burns, cold meat, bread, and jugs of water. She scribbled a note for Charlotte explaining the situation, then changed into her sturdiest dress and boots. When Joaquin pulled up with the loaded wagon, she was waiting. He looked surprised to see her ready to accompany him. "Miss Osborne, it's not safe. The men will need food and water," she said firmly, "and someone to tend burns if it comes to that. I'm coming." Seeing the determination in her eyes, Joaquin nodded reluctantly. "Stay with the wagon when we get there. Promise me that." "I promise to stay out of danger," she compromised. The journey to the South Valley took nearly an hour, and as they crested the final hill, Olivia gasped at the sight before them. A wall of flame danced across the dry grassland, pushed by a capricious wind. Smoke billowed skyward, turning the afternoon sun an eerie orange. On the fire line, men on horseback raced back and forth, setting backfires and beating at flames with wet blankets. Joaquin guided the wagon to a safe distance, where they could provide support without risking the horses or supplies. "Stay here," he ordered before galloping off to join the others. Olivia watched in horrified fascination as the men battled the relentless fire. It was like a living thing, reaching hungry fingers toward anything it could consume. The heat was palpable even from a distance, and ash fell like black snow around her. She lost track of time as she filled canteens for exhausted men who stumbled to the wagon for water, wiped soot from reddened eyes, and bandaged burned hands. The sun was beginning to set when a familiar figure on a black stallion emerged from the smoke-hazed distance. Samuel's face was blackened with soot, his clothes singed in places, but his eyes blazed with urgency as he rode up to the wagon. His expression shifted from determination to shock when he saw Olivia. "What in God's name are you doing here?" he demanded, dismounting. "Helping," she replied simply, holding out a canteen. He took it, downing half the contents in desperate gulps. "It's too dangerous. The wind could shift at any moment. I'm staying well back," she assured him. "How bad is it?" Samuel wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Bad. We've lost about 50 acres of grazing land already. If we can't contain it soon, it could reach the North Creek." His voice tightened. "Or the house." Olivia's stomach lurched. "Charlotte, I've sent Pete to warn her," Samuel said. "If necessary, he'll get her to town." He looked at Olivia, conflict evident in his expression. "I should send you with them. I'm more useful here," she insisted. "The men need water, food, and medical attention." Samuel studied her for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Stay with the wagon. If I signal, you drive out immediately." "Understood." "Yes," she promised. He remounted, pausing to add, "Be careful, Olivia." I couldn't bear it if he stopped himself, then simply said, "Be careful," before riding back toward the fire line. Hours passed in a haze of smoke and exertion. The men fought with grim determination, digging fire breaks, setting controlled burns to deprive the wildfire of fuel, working until they were ready to drop from exhaustion. Olivia did what she could, keeping them fed and hydrated, treating minor injuries and offering words of encouragement. It was well past midnight when the wind finally died down and the fire's advance slowed. By dawn, they had it contained, though small pockets still smoldered across the blackened landscape. The men gathered around the wagon, faces haggard with fatigue but triumphant. "We've got it," Hank announced, accepting a cup of coffee from Olivia with a grateful nod. "Lost about 70 acres all told, but the creek stopped it from spreading north." Samuel, who had been checking the perimeter one last time, rode up to join them. He looked utterly spent, his eyes red-rimmed from smoke, his hands raw from handling wet rope and blankets. Without a word, he dismounted and walked straight to Olivia, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Startled, she went rigid for a moment before melting against him, her arms encircling his waist. He smelled of smoke and sweat, and she could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her cheek. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair, as if confirming it to himself. "We all are," she replied softly. "Thanks to you and the men." He released her slowly, seeming to suddenly remember they had an audience. The cowhands were studiously looking elsewhere, though Olivia caught Hank's knowing smile before he turned away. "We should head back," Samuel said, his voice gruff. "Charlotte will be worried." The return journey was silent, everyone too exhausted for conversation. Samuel drove the wagon, insisting Olivia ride beside him while the other men followed on horseback. The rising sun revealed the extent of the fire's damaged acres of blackened earth where lush grassland had been just a day before. "It will recover," Samuel said, noting her dismayed expression. "The first rain will bring new growth. Nature is resilient that way." "Like people," Olivia observed, thinking of all they had both endured. He glanced at her, a small smile softening his sooty features. "Yes, exactly like that." At the ranch, Charlotte was waiting on the porch, her face lined with worry despite Pete's assurances that everyone was safe. She embraced Samuel, then Olivia, tears of relief tracking down her cheeks. "I was so frightened when Pete told me," she admitted. "And then when he said you'd gone to help, Olivia," she broke off, shaking her head. "You're both filthy and probably starving. Baths and breakfast immediately." Despite her exhaustion, Olivia helped prepare a hearty meal for the returning firefighters while Charlotte heated water for baths. The men ate ravenously, then stumbled off to the bunkhouse to sleep. Samuel remained at the table after the others had gone, nursing a cup of coffee, his freshly washed hair still damp at the nape of his neck. "You should rest," Olivia told him, pausing in her cleaning to touch his shoulder lightly. He caught her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. So should you. You were remarkable out there, Olivia, brave beyond measure. She shook her head. I only did what needed doing. You and the men were the brave ones, facing the flames directly. Courage takes many forms, he said, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. The intimate gesture sent warmth spiraling through her that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Charlotte's voice from the doorway broke the moment. Samuel, I've prepared a bath for you in your room. Olivia, yours will be ready after. Samuel released Olivia's hand reluctantly and stood. Thank you, Charlotte. I feel like I've swallowed half the ash in Wyoming territory. As he left, Olivia busied herself with the dishes, trying to ignore Charlotte's speculative gaze. My brother has feelings for you, Charlotte said without preamble, coming to help clear the table. Olivia nearly dropped the plate she was holding. Don't bother denying it, Charlotte interrupted with a gentle smile. I've known Samuel all his life. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Olivia's heart fluttered traitorously. Even if that were true, it would be inappropriate. I work for you. I have nothing to offer him, Charlotte scoffed. Nonsense. You have everything to offer: intelligence, courage, compassion. What more could a man want in a wife? Wife, Olivia echoed, feeling light-headed. Don't tell me you haven't thought of it, Charlotte teased. I've seen the way you watch him when you think no one is looking. Olivia's cheeks burned. It doesn't matter what I've thought. Samuel has been kind to me, nothing more. Charlotte's expression softened. My dear, kindness is the foundation of lasting love. The rest passion, desire, those things follow naturally when two people care for each other as you and Samuel clearly do. She patted Olivia's hand. Just something to consider while you soak in that bath. Left alone with her thoughts, Olivia allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, a future with Samuel, building a life together at Horizon, raising children, growing old side by side. The vision was so achingly beautiful that tears pricked at her eyes. She had lost so much: her parents, her home, her sense of security. Could she dare to hope for something so precious as Samuel's love? The arrival of August brought no relief from the heat, but it did bring news from an unexpected quarter. Samuel returned from town one afternoon with a letter addressed to Olivia in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. It's from your aunt, he explained, handing her the envelope. Apparently, Harrison did send a telegram after all. She wrote to him and he forwarded her letter here. Olivia stared at the envelope, her name written in flowing script, postmarked from St. Louis, Missouri. I never thought she'd respond, she murmured. Samuel squeezed her shoulder gently. I'll leave you to read it in privacy. I'll be in the barn if you need me. Alone in the kitchen, Olivia opened the letter with trembling fingers. My dear niece, I was greatly distressed to receive word of your father's passing and the unfortunate circumstances that followed. While your father and I had our differences, I never wished such hardship upon you or him. I write to inform you that you are not without family or resources. Your mother, my beloved sister, left in my keeping a small inheritance intended for you upon your coming of age or marriage. The sum of $500 has been held in trust these many years. Furthermore, I extend an invitation for you to join my household in St. Louis, where you might be properly introduced to society and secure a suitable match. As your mother's daughter, you deserve better than the crude frontier existence that has been your lot. Please advise me of your intentions at your earliest convenience. Your affectionate aunt, Rebecca Osborne Hamilton. Olivia read the letter twice, emotions warring within her. $500 was a significant sum, enough to establish herself independently if she chose. And St. Louis. A city with theaters, libraries, proper schools. Once, such an opportunity would have seemed like a dream. Yet now, the thought of leaving Horizon, leaving Charlotte and the baby soon to arrive, leaving Samuel. It felt like contemplating the amputation of her own heart. She was still sitting at the table, the letter before her, when Samuel returned from the barn. One look at her face and he was immediately at her side. Bad news? He asked, concern etching his features. No, she said slowly. Not bad at all, really. Unexpected. She handed him the letter. He read it quickly, his expression unreadable. When he looked up, his eyes were carefully neutral. This is a generous offer. St. Louis would offer opportunities Wyoming territory cannot. Yes, Olivia agreed, watching him closely. It would, and the inheritance that gives you choices. His voice was steady, but she noticed his hand tightening on the edge of the table. You wouldn't need to work as a housekeeper. No, I wouldn't. A heavy silence fell between them. Samuel seemed to be wrestling with something, emotions flickering across his face too quickly for Olivia to interpret. What will you do? He finally asked, the question barely audible. Olivia took a deep breath. Everything hinged on her next words, on his response. That depends, she said carefully. On what? On whether there's a reason for me to stay. Their eyes met, and in that moment all pretense fell away. The longing, the fear, the hope, it was all there, naked and vulnerable between them. Olivia, Samuel began, his voice rough with emotion. I have no right to ask you to stay. St. Louis could give you the life you deserve, comfort, culture, society. What can I offer compared to that? She reached across the table and took his hand. Everything that matters, she said simply. Samuel stared at their joined hands, then back at her face. I've been fighting this since the day I brought you here, he confessed. Telling myself it was inappropriate, that you were under my protection, that you deserved better than a man with my past. What past? Olivia asked gently. He sighed, a sound heavy with old pain. After our parents died, our uncle, he was a cruel man. He used us as free labor, beat us for the smallest infractions, barely fed us enough to keep us alive. When I was 16, I fought back. He came at Charlotte with a belt and something in me snapped. I nearly killed him with my bare hands. Olivia squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. I took Charlotte and ran. We lived hard for years. I worked as a stable hand, a ranch hand, whatever would put food in our mouths. When the war came, I enlisted for the steady pay. I saw things, did things. He shook his head. I'm not the refined gentleman your aunt would want for you. I don't want a refined gentleman, Olivia said fiercely. I want you, Samuel Jackson, the man who couldn't stand by while an injustice was committed, the man who treats his workers with respect and his sister with devotion. The man who risks his life to save his land and the people who depend on him. Samuel's eyes darkened with emotion. Are you certain? I don't want your gratitude, Olivia, I want. He struggled for words. Love, she suggested softly, because that's what I feel for you. Not gratitude, though I am grateful. Not obligation, though I do feel indebted. Love, Samuel, pure and simple. With a groan, he stood and pulled her to her feet, into his arms. I love you, he whispered against her hair. I think I've loved you since I saw you standing so brave and defiant on that auction block, refusing to be broken. Olivia lifted her face to his, and their lips met in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something more urgent. Years of loneliness and longing finding release in each other's embrace. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, unwilling to move apart. Marry me, Samuel said, the words somewhere between a question and a plea. Stay here, build a life with me, be my wife and partner in all things. Yes, Olivia answered without hesitation. Yes to all of it. A delighted squeal from the doorway interrupted them. Charlotte stood there, hands clasped over her heart, eyes shining with happy tears. Finally, she exclaimed. I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the root cellar until you admitted your feelings. Samuel laughed, keeping one arm around Olivia's waist. How long have you been eavesdropping, you shameless creature? Long enough, Charlotte replied unapologetically. Now, when shall we have the wedding, before or after the baby arrives? Olivia looked up at Samuel, suddenly practical despite her joy. I should reply to my aunt first, and perhaps I should go to St. Louis just long enough to collect my inheritance and meet her. She is my only blood relation, after all. Samuel nodded, though his arm tightened around her. Of course, family matters. A shadow crossed his face. Though I hate the thought of you so far away, even temporarily. Then come with me, Olivia suggested impulsively. Meet my aunt, help me settle my affairs. We could be married in St. Louis, then return to Horizon together. The ranch, Samuel began, can manage without you for a few weeks, Charlotte interrupted. Hank is perfectly capable, and you haven't taken a day off in 5 years, brother dear. Samuel looked from his sister to Olivia, his expression softening. A wedding journey to St. Louis, then. And a chance for your aunt to see that frontier life hasn't made you a complete savage. His eyes twinkled with humor. Speak for yourself, Olivia teased, reaching up to brush a lock of hair from his forehead. I'm perfectly civilized. Says the woman who drove a wagon into a wildfire, Charlotte murmured, earning herself a mock glare from Olivia. Planning for the journey consumed the next few weeks. Samuel made arrangements for the ranch's management in his absence, while Olivia corresponded with her aunt, explaining her engagement and their intention to visit. Rebecca's reply was cordial if somewhat reserved, extending an invitation for them to stay at her home during their visit. September arrived with cooler temperatures and Charlotte's increasing discomfort as her time drew near. Dr. Willis from town examined her and predicted the baby would arrive before the month's end. You shouldn't travel until after the birth, Olivia told Samuel as they sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Charlotte will need us both. Samuel nodded, taking her hand in his. Since their engagement, these small touches had become constant between them, a hand at the small of her back, fingers intertwined as they walked, a kiss stolen in the privacy of the kitchen. Each contact felt like a promise of the deeper intimacy to come. We'll leave in October then, he agreed. The weather should still be fair for traveling, and it will give us time to prepare for winter upon our return. Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing through her. I never imagined my life could change so completely in just a few months. From the darkest day to the brightest future, Samuel pressed a kiss to her temple. You deserved better than what fate handed you. I'm only grateful I was in the right place to help rewrite your story. Our story, she corrected, lifting her face for a proper kiss, which he gladly provided. 2 weeks later, in the early hours of a crisp September morning, Charlotte went into labor. The baby, impatient to enter the world, arrived before Dr. Willis could be fetched from town. It fell to Olivia, with her limited knowledge from helping at neighbors' births years ago, to assist Charlotte through the ordeal. Samuel paced the hallway outside, alternately praying and swearing as his sister's cries echoed through the house. When at last the wailing of a newborn joined the chorus, he nearly broke down the door in his haste to enter. A girl, Olivia announced, tears of joy streaming down her face as she placed the swaddled infant in Charlotte's arms. A perfect little girl. Charlotte, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at her brother. Meet your niece, Samuel, Elizabeth Olivia Ellis. Samuel's eyes widened at the middle name, then filled with tears as he knelt beside the bed, one large finger gently stroking the baby's cheek. She's beautiful, Charlotte. Just like her mother. Olivia, watching from the foot of the bed, felt her heart swell with love for this family that had become her own. Samuel looked up, catching her gaze, and the emotion that passed between them needed no words. Later, when Charlotte and the baby were sleeping and the house was quiet in the pale light of dawn, Samuel found Olivia in the kitchen, preparing coffee for the men who would soon be stirring. You were amazing, he said, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. Charlotte said she couldn't have done it without you. Olivia leaned back against his chest, savoring his warmth and strength. I was terrified the whole time, but trying not to show it. I've never been so relieved as when I heard that first cry. Samuel turned her in his arms, his expression serious. I want that with you children, a family. I want to build something that will outlast us both. I want that too, she whispered, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw, more than anything. Then let's not wait, he said suddenly. Let's be married here before we leave for St. Louis. A small ceremony with Charlotte and the baby and the men who have become like family, then a proper reception at your aunt's when we arrive in the city. Olivia's heart leapt at the idea. Are you certain? What about the preparations, a dress? Charlotte mentioned she has her wedding dress stored away. She's already offered it to you. And Reverend Thompson comes through Promise Creek next week. It could all be arranged quickly. His eyes searched hers. Unless you'd prefer to wait to have a grander wedding in St. Louis. No, Olivia said firmly. I want to leave for St. Louis as your wife, not your fiancé. I want to start our journey together already joined. The joy that bloomed on Samuel's face was all the confirmation she needed that she'd made the right choice. The wedding took place 10 days later on the porch of Horizon Ranch, with Charlotte, baby Elizabeth, the ranch hands, and a few neighbors as witnesses. Reverend Thompson, a circuit-riding preacher who served the scattered communities of the territory, officiated with a simple but heartfelt ceremony. Olivia wore Charlotte's ivory silk dress, slightly altered to fit her smaller frame. Samuel had ridden all the way to Cheyenne to find a gold band for her finger, returning with a delicate ring engraved with intertwining vines. "To symbolize how our lives have grown together," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger, his voice husky with emotion. As the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting long golden shadows across the land they both loved, Samuel and Olivia Jackson were pronounced husband and wife. The kiss they shared before their small gathering of friends held all the promise of the future they would build together, a future neither could have imagined 6 months earlier. That night, as they lay tangled in each other's arms in what was now their shared bedroom, Samuel traced lazy patterns on Olivia's bare shoulder, his touch reverent. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Completely," she sighed, nestling closer to him. "Though I still can't quite believe this is real, that I'm really your wife." "Believe it," he said, tilting her face up for a kiss that quickly rekindled the passion they had just spent hours exploring. "I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it for a moment." 2 weeks later, with Charlotte and baby Elizabeth settled comfortably, and the ranch in Hank's capable hands, Samuel and Olivia boarded the eastbound train for the first leg of their journey to St. Louis. As the Wyoming landscape rolled past the window, Olivia leaned against Samuel's shoulder, their fingers intertwined. "Nervous about meeting your aunt?" he asked, sensing her pensive mood. "A little," she admitted. "She can be formidable and judgmental. But having you beside me makes all the difference." Samuel squeezed her hand. "We face everything together now, Mrs. Jackson, the good and the bad." Olivia smiled at the still new title. "Mrs. Jackson," she repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Samuel murmured, bending to kiss her temple. "So do I." The train whistle blew, its long, plaintive note echoing across the plains as they journeyed eastward, leaving behind the place where their story had begun, but carrying with them the love that would sustain them through all the chapters yet to come. In the years that followed, Olivia would often think back to that terrible day in Promise Creek when her father died and her life seemed to end. How could she have known then that from such darkness would come the greatest light she had ever known? That a stranger's act of kindness would lead to a love that would define her life. Samuel had paid double and called her family. In return, she had given him her heart, her trust, and a future filled with love. It was, they both agreed, the most precious bargain either of them had ever struck.